I think we don't need to question my patience because I'm with the guys. I'm not separate from them. So
going into the season, shooting is a concern of mine. You know, you lose a guy like KCP who is a 40% three-point shooter. You know what I mean? And
the cloud of darkness that was surrounding the Denver Nuggets in the offseason seems to have officially continued into the NBA regular season. Now, I understand it's still very early in the season, but this isn't anything that's surprising anybody. Given the moves that they made in the offseason and the fact that there was turmoil between their head coach and their general manager, the Denver Nuggets are now panicking. It's only been a few games into the regular season, but technically speaking, they're currently last place in the Western Conference. Is there a way they could climb out of this hole? How did they get here, and what direction do the Nuggets go from here? So before we get to the content, make sure you check us out on Snapchat and Instagram if you want to get bonus content from us. And now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. Today's video is sponsored by SeatGeek. NBA season's officially here, and you know I have to watch my Los Angeles Lakers play at Crypto Arena. Everyone can use my promo code TheFlightMike10 to get 10% off of any event. Whether it's sports, concerts, or festivals, you name it and SeatGeek has it. My personal favorite feature about SeatGeek is not only do they let you preview the seats that you're purchasing, but they also give a score for each deal that you're getting. So on the app, if you look for green dots, green means you're getting a good deal, whereas red means you're getting a bad deal. Now, it's important to note that no matter how many times you've used my promo code in the past before, if you use my code TheFlightMike10 on your next purchase, you'll get a 10% off discount. So take out your phone, open the SeatGeek app, and add FlightMike10 to your account. What are you waiting for? Do it now because the offer is only available for a limited time. And thank you, SeatGeek, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? The 2023 Denver Nuggets were the blueprint for the brand new NBA. About 5 years ago, many teams thought that the blueprint for success was the Golden State Warriors model, which is exactly why Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets were literally trying to mimic what the Golden State Warriors were trying to build, with some tweaks, of course. Their offense primarily revolved around James Harden's isolation scoring, but that's besides the point. The Denver Nuggets kind of took what the Houston Rockets were doing, mixed it in with what the San Antonio Spurs championship teams of the early 2010s were doing, and created a brand new blueprint for success. It wasn't an offense that was built around a guard, rather it was an offense that was built around Nikola Jokic's very unique skill set. A big man that wasn't necessarily athletic, but was primarily known for his tremendous basketball IQ. Jokic was always praised for his ability to make the correct basketball play. He didn't possess any athleticism at all whatsoever. On the contrary, it was quite the opposite. But it seemed like Jokic, every time he was on the basketball court, would consistently make the right play, which is a huge reason why he won MVP 3 of the last 4 years. He was truly a unicorn at the position, and Tim Connolly did a masterful job crafting a team around him, selecting Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. in the NBA draft, but on top of that, making very intelligent trades, trading for players like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was the prototypical 3-and-D type guard to flank Nikola Jokic, trading Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and a future first-round pick for Aaron Gordon. These were moves that teams were not making at the time, because at the time, success in the NBA wasn't dependent on how strong your front court was, it was more dependent on the strength of your backcourt. That's why teams were so laser focused on making the new version of the Splash Brothers, but the Denver Nuggets focused on building the best team they possibly could around their star center that they nailed in the middle of the 2014 NBA draft while a Taco Bell commercial was playing. The unique thing about this was Tim Connolly wouldn't be with the team when they won their 2023 NBA championship. As a matter of fact, a brand new executive would take his place, and that executive was Calvin Booth. It's very unique because typically whenever a team is constructed and good enough to win a championship, the man that constructed the team and the architect of the team is typically there to celebrate with them. But not in the case of the Denver Nuggets. Tim Connolly got an offer that he just simply couldn't refuse, signing a 5-year, $40 million contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves as their president of basketball operations. It's really unique because Connolly is credited for the Aaron Gordon Gordon trade and bringing in JaVale McGee, and a huge misconception is that Calvin Booth has been completely useless ever since. But that isn't necessarily the case either. Although it wouldn't continue this way, Calvin Booth actually started out his tenure with the Denver Nuggets very strong, drafting Christian Brown with the 21st pick in the 2022 NBA draft and trading JaMychal Green and a 2027 first-round pick and 2 second-round picks for Peyton Watson. Booth is also credited for his signing of Bruce Brown. And one trade I don't really know who to give the right credit to is the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope trade, because technically Tim Connolly was in charge for that trade, but apparently it was Calvin Booth that orchestrated the KCP trade. Regardless, Calvin Booth started out really strong as the Denver Nuggets general manager, and you can make a very legitimate argument that if Calvin Booth never took the job as the Denver Nuggets GM, then the Nuggets might have never won a championship. So what went wrong, and how did Calvin Booth go from making brilliant moves to having his head coach literally hate him? And there are multiple layers as to why the Denver Nuggets weren't able to find the same success last year. Fans will easily point out to the fact that they lost 2 very key rotation players in Bruce Brown and Jeff Green in free agency, and they just invested their money in the wrong areas. But at the same time, this was simply a team that was just not prepared for the new CBA. You see, Michael Porter Jr. already signed a major max contract extension when he was up for a max contract extension, and to be honest, that's not something I'm pointing the blame finger at the Denver Nuggets for, because that's typically what you would do under the old CBA, and it would have been standard for Michael Porter Jr. to sign such a contract. The contract was agreed to 3 years ago. It was a rookie extension. Porter Jr. was supposed to take the next step following this rookie extension to become one of the franchise cornerstones for the Denver Nuggets. And to be honest, he more or less stayed the same player, which isn't a bad thing, but it's still not what you were hoping for in return for your max money. I mean, again, MPJ averaged 17 points per game off of 40% shooting last year in 31 minutes played with 7 rebounds. These are incredible statistics for a third option on a championship team, but at the same time, you don't want to be giving your third option on a championship team that type of money. But that money was given out before the new CBA was formed, so this put the Nuggets in a very difficult position. How do they retain key role players like Bruce Brown and Jeff Green when they need to pay Michael Porter Jr. and eventually need to pay Jamal Murray and eventually need to pay Aaron Gordon? Do you become a second apron team, or do you try to bank on the NBA draft and hopefully you can draft players that fill in the void that the role players left behind? That's what Calvin Booth was hoping to do. But unfortunately, he really invested in the wrong young players. For example, the Denver Nuggets drafted Zeke Naji with the 22nd overall pick in the 2020 NBA draft. They were hoping that Naji could develop into a solid rotational piece, but so far he was anything but that. During the 2022 to 2023 season, he averaged 13.7 minutes per game and only had 5 points and 2.6 rebounds per game. The craziest part is, despite these terrible statistics, Calvin Booth decided to bring back Naji, which didn't really make that much sense, signing Naji to a 4-year, $32 million contract. But that's not the only thing that would get done by the Denver Nuggets that would just make no sense. In the summer that the Denver Nuggets won a championship, they decided to sign Reggie Jackson to a 2-year, $10 million contract. Now, I know on paper this doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but whenever you're also just handing out free money to Zeke Naji combined with Reggie Jackson, this would have been enough money to retain Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Instead, the Nuggets decided to burn this money on a player that literally averaged 10 minutes per game for them in the previous season, and a backup point guard that was closer to the end of his career than the beginning. It was so bad that the Nuggets had to give up multiple second-round picks in order to move on from Reggie Jackson. And if they moved on from Zeke Naji, then there would have been hope that they could have retained Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, but alas, that's not what would end up happening. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope would leave this past offseason to join the Orlando Magic. So now, a team that originally won an NBA championship based off of its depth, lost all of its depth, and needs to depend on Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Jamal Murray all that much more. And this is consistent with what their general manager said to the press 1 year ago. I just want dudes that we try to develop and it's sustainable. If it costs us the chance to win a championship this year, so be it. It's worth the investment. It's more about winning 3 of 6 or 3 out of 7, 4 of 8 than it is about trying to go back to back, which is truly an insane statement to say. I mean, trying to bank on being a good evaluator of talent and hitting on your picks in the NBA draft is a great strategy, but recklessly giving away $32 million to a player that played less than 10 minutes per game last year, 13 minutes per game the year before, and averaged almost the same amount of points when he played 17 minutes per game in his sophomore season is just reckless. But the Nuggets' problems get way worse. Now that the Denver Nuggets just burned their money, they have to depend on players that are willing to take on veteran minimum contracts. So what was the Denver Nuggets' major acquisition in the summer? Russell Westbrook. I originally said that this was going to be a disaster, and I know what fans are going to be saying.
Mike, you're just a Russell Westbrook hater!
And look, man, I loved prime Russell Westbrook. I loved his MVP season. I loved when he called Kevin Durant a cupcake for leaving the OKC Thunder, because to be honest, he was a cupcake for leaving the OKC Thunder. His 3 straight seasons averaging a triple-double will always go down in NBA history. He's the only player in NBA history to average a triple-double for 2 separate teams. There's no question in my mind that Russell Westbrook will one day be a Hall of Famer. But at the same time, Russell Westbrook's skill set just doesn't work in the modern NBA, primarily due to his stubbornness. For some reason, Russell Westbrook refuses to develop a 3-point shot, which I just think is lazy. And maybe I'm a little biased because I've seen many players reinvent themselves in the latter stages of their career. Lonzo Ball literally remade his jump shot following his career with the Los Angeles Lakers, boosted his 3-point shot by 10%, which is absolutely insane. But maybe you're thinking,
Russell Westbrook's way older than Lonzo Ball.
very legitimate point. What about Jason Kidd? Jason Kidd was an average 3-point shooter throughout his career, averaging about 34% from 3 with the New Jersey Nets. But when he got traded to the Dallas Mavericks, a big emphasis was placed on his ability to shoot the 3, and he was able to shoot over 40% from 3 in the 2008 to 2010 season. Of course, he did regress a little bit in the latter stages of his career back to his baseline, but these are just examples of instances of Hall of Fame players reinventing themselves in order to fit into the modern NBA. And so far, Russell Westbrook just hasn't been able to do it. With the Los Angeles Lakers, it was a catastrophe because he was still getting paid supermax money despite him completely throwing the offense out of rhythm. With the Clippers, it was a little bit more forgivable because he was coming off of the bench and he was getting paid a veteran minimum contract. But with the Denver Nuggets, now that he's being depended on to occupy a similar role that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope did, it's been an unmitigated disaster. So far, the Denver Nuggets are 0-2. And look at how the OKC Thunder defended Russell Westbrook when they were going up against him. I mean, it's not that hard. He's been shooting 11% from 3 this year. This isn't ideal for a center in the NBA, but it's completely inexcusable for a guard in the NBA today. At the time that I'm making this video, Russell Westbrook is 2 of 18 as a Denver Nugget, making 1 out of his 9 threes, and the Nuggets are 0-2. I can't believe that this was the strategy here. The Nuggets should have given up a first-round pick to offload Zeke Naji's contract and tried to extend Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. And the fact that they weren't able to do this is a huge reason why Mike Malone is so pissed off at the Denver Nuggets. We previously made a video on this, and Michael Malone pretty much backed up everything we said in this video in this interview following their opening night loss to the Thunder.
General thoughts. Yeah, losing sucks. Going into the season, shooting is a concern of mine. You know, you lose a guy like KCP who's a 40% 3-point shooter. You know what I mean? And
I know fans are going to be saying,
Oh my God, Mike, he's already making excuses.
but I would be upset at Calvin Booth also if there was a way to retain KCP. If you remember in the offseason, we discussed this. There's rumblings that Mike Malone and the Nuggets front office don't see eye to eye. And this has come to us from Zach Lowe, formerly of ESPN, an individual that has a great reputation for his reporting. So now things are a disaster for the Nuggets. They're even more dependent on Christian Braun, who used to be one of their best players off the bench, but now he needs to start because KCP is no longer on the team. And although Christian Braun is averaging the most points he's ever had per game in his career in the 2 games he's played so far, he's also been struggling from 3. Why? Because the spacing is all thrown off. In the offseason, when I said that Russell Westbrook was essentially going to be occupying the same role as KCP, fans were saying no, Russell Westbrook was just going to be the backup to Jamal Murray. But if you guys paid attention so far, Russell Westbrook and Jamal Murray are being used in the same same lineups together. But the main issue for Denver has been their bench. Denver's bench has started the season 10 of 46 from the field. The 4 players off the bench have combined for just 5 rebounds versus the Los Angeles Clippers, which gives you an idea of how terrible this team size has been. Now, Jamal Murray claims that this is coming from chemistry, and when he was playing today, he didn't know if he had to go to the 2 or the 3. But now the Nuggets don't know what to do with Jamal Murray. When they played him in the second unit, Jamal Murray registered a minus 37.3 net rating, a 37.9% rebounding rate, and a 38.3% true shooting percentage. So clearly Michael Malone is struggling to use this brand new team, and the biggest red flag of all is this is despite Nikola Jokic dropping 40 versus the Los Angeles Clippers in an instant classic that resulted in Jokic saying this after the performance.
Just because I score 40 tonight, that doesn't mean I play good. I think we all need to be better, and I think we don't need to question my patience because I'm with the guys. I'm not separated from them. So just because I score a lot doesn't mean that I play good or I play bad. I think we all need to be better.
I mean, it's truly a shame to see the Nuggets go out this way. One has to wonder what the answer is at this point. How do they solve these issues? And the solution is relatively simple. You see, the Denver Nuggets have lost so much of their depth over the past 2 seasons, whether it was Bruce Brown 2 off seasons ago or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope last off season. The Nuggets weren't necessarily the deepest team in the NBA, but their role players would make a significant dent whenever they would play, and they spent some of their money inefficiently. Michael Malone doesn't like playing his young players. He likes depending on veteran role players. And the team is also struggling with chemistry. So the number one player that could fix all of these issues is also on a team that happens to be rebuilding, that also drafted a player that occupies the same position, a player that is now 32 years old and that has tremendous chemistry with Nikola Jokic, and that individual is none other than Bogdan Bogdanovic. In order to make a trade for Bogdanovic happen, the Denver Nuggets would need to trade Zeke Naji, who's on a 4-year deal and is a clear negative asset. On top of this, the Denver Nuggets are kind of screwed because they don't have their own draft pick this year. So they would have to give up future draft picks in order for this to work, or they would have to trade a player like Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, or Darren Holmes, or even Christian Brown to make this trade worth it. All these players are very solid role players, especially Christian Brown, but none of them are necessarily 30 minutes per game type players. Rather, they're like 15 to 20 minutes per game type players. I mean, for all you know, Christian Brown could turn into a 30 minutes per game type player. He's only played 30 minutes per game in 2 games this season, but so far, this is my impression of him. If you take a look at the Atlanta Hawks roster, for the most part, it's a relatively young roster. Onyeka Okongwu is 23 years old, Jalen Johnson's 22 years old, Zachary Rissache is 19 years old, but Bogdan Bogdanovic is 32 years old. Trading him to the Denver Nuggets for Zeke Naji and a future first-round pick, in addition to Peyton Watson, would make a lot of sense for both sides. Bogdanovic would reunite with his Serbian teammate, he would provide the floor spacing that the Denver Nuggets desperately need, and he would occupy the same exact position that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope did last year. Is he as good of a defender as KCP was? No, but he's also not a terrible defender either. At the end of the day, the Nuggets started out 0-2, and for all you know, people could be saying,
Mike, you're just panicking too quickly.
But at the end of the day, I said this multiple times throughout the offseason, and I'll say it now. The Denver Nuggets have a similar issue as the 2021 Lakers did. Obviously not to as egregious of a point, but the 2021 Lakers' main issue was the fact that they were paying Russell Westbrook a supermax contract when he was shrinking the floor. There was no way you could win with a roster like that. In the case of the Denver Nuggets, they have significantly more room. They spent their money inefficiently when they signed Zeke Naji to an extension, and they failed to bring in some sort of replacement for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But you could easily find a way out of this if you're able to orchestrate such a trade to bring in some shooting in the middle of the season. If they stand pat, I believe that the Denver Nuggets will become a play-in team if they're lucky, because the Western Conference is looking significantly more competitive this year. The Los Angeles Lakers hit the ground running to start the season, and at the time we're recording this video, have yet to lose a game. The OKC Thunder are the perfect combination of youth and a veteran presence, and they have an MVP candidate in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The New Orleans Pelicans, if fully healthy, could be one of the superpowers in the Western Conference, even though they lost DeJounte Murray. The Memphis Grizzlies and the Phoenix Suns got off to a good start. The Los Angeles Clippers are treading water and are still 2-1 without Kawhi Leonard. The Minnesota Timberwolves trade for Julius Randle seem to have paid off, and the Golden State Warriors are doing a pretty good job without Klay Thompson. Now, the Mavericks have only played 2 games so far this season, but they are one of the most improved teams in the Western Conference, and that's already the first 9 teams in the Western Conference standings. The West is incredibly deep this year. The Nuggets don't have any time to waste, and they have to make a move quickly if they want to be able to finish within the top 6 spots of the NBA playoffs this year. This sample size should be all Nuggets fans need to know a move needs to be made immediately. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree with me. Do you think this is a way too early overreaction? Do you think Russell Westbrook will turn it back around and lead the Nuggets to a championship? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.